Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Lockshin, professor of wine marketing at the University of South Australia and former head of the School of Marketing there for the last 10 years. Today, I'm going to talk to growers, winemakers in Ohio and other parts of the Eastern United States about evidence-based marketing, marketing that's based on science and research, not on anecdotal talking or thought bubbles or whatever. And though the title says brand image and price setting, I'm actually going to tell you why we're not going to use brand image. Instead, we're going to look at mental availability. As you know, or probably don't know, I was head of the How Grape Industries program in the 1980s and up till 1991 when I left and moved to Canada. And then in 1995, my family and I moved to Australia, and we've been here ever since. And I've worked at the University of South Australia, Ehrenberg Bass School for a number of years, 22 years. And one of the interesting things is that we really have a scientific focus on marketing. And I'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes. But I want to emphasize that we don't just look at wine. In fact, we do very little work on wine. We do work across a wide range of categories, products, types of companies, but we look for laws or patterns that apply whether you're selling wine or you're selling ice cream or you're selling television viewing, automobiles, petrol, whatever it is. So we'll talk about that in the first couple slides. Then the meat of the presentation is to talk about what we call category entry points. What are the things that drive or incentivize or cause a potential buyer to enter the category to buy wine? That's a category entry point. And we'll talk about what those are and how you might think about those and related to your business. And then we'll talk about, rather than brand image, we're going to talk about mental availability, which is really your brand, your wine coming to mind in a buying situation when someone enters the category. So I'm going to talk about that, what that is, and how we relate those category entry points and mental availability to help you build your wine sales. And then finally, the last third of the presentation approximately will be about pricing and why I call it the most dangerous marketing tool. Hopefully it won't be dangerous for you. We'll talk about how we can make that a useful strategic tool rather than a tactical tool. So first, just a slide or two about the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. We are the world's largest center to do research about marketing, how marketing works. We're part of the University of South Australia, and we're a not-for-profit research institute funded by about 75 companies around the world. You can see that little red dot in the bottom of the map there of Australia. That's Adelaide. And from this remote corner of the world, some of the world's largest corporations pay us an annual fee to do research about marketing. And because those corporations span a whole range of businesses, we do research that's useful to everyone, one that really looks at patterns of buying behavior. It doesn't matter what you're selling. Here's just a quick look, and I don't expect you to read all of these, but I think you'll recognize some of the names here when you see companies like Boston Beer Company or Coca-Cola, Colgate-Palmolive, Diageo, ESPN. You also see banks like HSBC, coffee companies like Dowie Dewey Egberts, and even companies like LinkedIn and Facebook. And we had Google for a while, but they dropped out. But a whole range of different companies that we do research for. Their funding pays for PhD students, pays for data collection and report writing, which we publish as academic work. And then these corporate sponsors, of course, get specialized reports about our research. So we are a broad-based marketing research, not market research company, not for profit. And we do some work in wine, mainly led by myself. So there's lots of marketing science, and I could spend the whole talk today just about marketing science, but we're going to talk about one big pattern, one law of marketing. We start with the thinking that in reality, the people that we're selling to, whether they are trade buyers for restaurants or wine stores or whatever, or they're consumers, they are what we call cognitive misers. They don't spend a lot of time thinking about things like your brand. They have a lot more personal things that they spend their time and effort and mental cognitive abilities thinking about. And there's lots of brands all over the world, whether in wine or coffee or ice cream or detergent, doesn't really matter. There's always many brands trying to get consumers' attention. We call it attention and love. There's been research, and you've probably read research or read, I wouldn't call it research, you've read statements about brand love. And in reality, the work we've done and others as well show that very, very few people can have what we call love for their brands. They like their brands, they have brand preferences, but love is for people, love is for your country, love is for things like that, not typically for products. And this shows up in what we call polygamous loyalty. And what that means is in any category someone's in, here we're talking about wine, people have preferences, they have favorites, but they don't just buy one brand, they have multiple brands. And they have some favorites, some they buy once in a while, and some they buy every once in a long while. So that's what we call polygamous loyalty. They have patterns of buying. They don't buy all the brands, but they have some brands that they buy, and different people have different polygamous loyalty to different brands in a category. Here's just a cartoon that illustrates what I said. This is some brand analysts, marketing analysts looking at the brain of a consumer, and they're looking for where their pickle relish is. And of course, the brain is filled up, the cognitive thinking, what the person spends their time thinking about, the kids, the family, husband or wife, mom and dad, the career, themselves, their dog, their friends, all those kinds of things. Your brand really doesn't show up. And what that means is people don't spend a lot of time thinking about buying wine or thinking even about your brand. You spend a lot of time on that, but the consumer doesn't. And if we understand that, and we can look at what patterns flow from this, we can do a better job of developing marketing. So in the real world, in any category, brands vary tremendously in market share. You have categories like soft drinks where Coca-Cola might have 30 or 40% of the market, or 25% of the market, and Pepsi maybe half as much. And then Dr. Pepper and other brands less, and down to localized brands that have very small market shares. In wine, we might see the biggest brand in a country having 4, 5, 7% market share, some brands with 3 or 2%, and then brands like yours and many small wineries having 0.001, a thousandth of a percent market share. So we know in any category, brands vary tremendously in their market share. And this means they vary in what we call penetration. And this is an important concept. Market share is your percentage of sales in a category. Penetration are the number of customers who have bought your brand at least once in a time period, say a year. So the biggest brands have lots and lots of customers, and smaller brands like most of yours have fewer customers. Fair enough, we understand that. But what we find is quite interesting and really useful is that there's much, much less variation in the loyalty and the times somebody repurchases. Somebody may repurchase your brand maybe only half as much as a brand that has 10 or 100 or 1,000 times more market share. So those people have preferences. They don't pick all the large brands, but they pick some. But your brand's penetration, your brand's loyalty is not that far distant from the biggest brands. And what that means is you can't get those heavy buyers, the regular buyers, to buy more. The only way to grow your brand is to get more what we call infrequent or occasional buyers to buy your brand. Get those people who bought once last year to buy twice. Get people who buy wine but didn't buy your brand when they bought wine to buy once. Get those customers to buy 1 or 2 or 3 times. The bigger people who buy your brand more often, that'll take care of itself, as I'll show you in the next few slides. Here's a generic chart that talks about loyalty, and these are real numbers. We just have disguised the brand. So a typical market might have the biggest brand with 16% market share and the smallest couple brands with a 1% market share. So the brand's market share varies by almost 16 times. But if you look across the columns, What we're showing you now is the purchase rate or the repeat rate. So the biggest brand of cereal might be bought 5 times by the average customer, and the smallest brand 3 times. So that small brand has people buying it regularly, just not very many people. And if we look at doctors' prescriptions of antidepressants, we look at buying cars in the United States, we look at buying TV set brands in China, we even look at people watching TV programs in the United States, we see that though the brand market share may vary 16 times, the actual purchase frequency or repurchase frequency only varies maybe 2 times or less. This is true in the wine area, which I'll show in the next slide, but this is what we call the double jeopardy law. Andrew Ehrenberg named it this, the namesake of our institute. He found that small brands suffer 2 times. They have fewer customers, of course, that's why they're small, and those customers are slightly less loyal. They tend to buy the brand a little bit less than people buy the larger brands. So more popular brands are known by and bought by more people. They have more what we call mental availability. It's not about their image. It's just, are they available when someone's going shopping? And the people who know the brand are more likely to say they like the brand. So that just means they have some awareness in their mind about that brand. Here we have some data we collected in the Australian wine market. This is data from one chain of retail wine stores with about 110 stores across Australia. And this is data from 5,000 customers who have loyalty cards. So these are people that actually shop this chain on a regular basis. They have a loyalty card. And what can we see? That the biggest brand at this time was Penfolds. They had a 5% market share in this particular chain of stores. Goes down to 3%, 2%, 1%. And the chart actually goes down a long, long way to get to brands that have 0.001%, a thousandth or a 10,000th of a percent. Tiny, tiny brands, probably more like your brands than like Penfolds or Rosemont. The penetration, you can see, varies about 4 times, almost the same variance as the market share. So Penfolds was bought by 37% of the customers to this retail chain in a year, and Cape Mentel was bought by 9%. And of course, as we go down to the smallest brands, they were bought by a bit smaller than that. But the people who buy those small brands buy them a couple of times a year. They just don't buy every other brand. And you can see the purchase frequency, how often people buy the brands. Penfolds bought average 1.7 times a year, and the smallest brands in our chart only bought 1.2 times a year. Not very different. The big difference is Penfolds has a lot more customers. Not that they're more loyal to Penfolds, but they have a lot more customers. And we find the same pattern whether we're looking at regions, well-known versus less-known regions, grape varieties, well-known versus less-known grape varieties, countries, and even price points. But we won't have time to talk about that today. So what we find is a brand's buyers are made of a smaller number of regular or what we call heavy buyers and many, many more light or infrequent buyers. Now, those heavy buyers are important. They often account for 50, 60% of your sales, rarely more than 60%, but they may only be 20% of your total customers. So 80% of your customers often account for 40, 45, 50% of your sales. Now that sounds like, well, I should focus on the heavy customers. The problem is those heavy buyers are not going to buy more. They're already buying more often than most others. They're unlikely to buy more. What you want to do is get those infrequent customers who buy you less often to buy you a little more often. We also know that when you aim your communications at these infrequent buyers, people who may know your brand but don't buy very often, you're going to communicate with your heavy buyers anyway. So we're not saying don't communicate with heavy buyers. What we're saying is think about in your communications, will this communication reach some of those light or occasional buyers? It will reach the heavy buyers. Will it reach some of these other new buyers? When you're thinking about attending a wine trade fair or a wine show or something like that, and you want to attract more people, will there be people who don't buy your brand but who buy wine? That's what you want to focus on in your marketing. This is just a chart from that same data of the chain of 110 wine stores, showing what we call the negative binomial curve. And you can see going up are the number of customers, and going across are the number of bottles bought. And the highest peak there, we've taken out the people who didn't buy, people who had a membership card but didn't buy during the year we were looking at the data. So the greatest number of people only bought one bottle. So if this store could get them to buy 2 bottles, that would be impressive and very important to their sales. You can see there's some interesting peaks. Those are for buying 6 packs, 12-pack cases, 18 bottles, 24 bottles. But you can see there's very, very few people who are buying 100 bottles or 200 or 300 bottles in a year. They're there, but the majority of the buyers are buying less often. What you want to do now, this is a store chain. It's clear those people are probably buying at other chains. So what they want to do is get them to buy maybe 1 or 2 more times at your store to get more sales. So I hope you understand the law of double jeopardy. Heavy buyers are good, but you need to reach that 80% of your sales base that only buy a few times a year. Now let's talk about category entry points. This is something that we've developed at Ehrenberg Bass. It really measures what triggers the decision to consider buying from a category. So we're talking about wine today. What triggers someone to think about buying wine today? Maybe you have to give a gift. Maybe they're making a dinner and they want to buy some wine to have with dinner. Maybe it's a romantic occasion. You can begin to think about these things, and I'll show you in the next slide some measurements that we've made of this with wine. But it's important to realize that if you're looking at brand image, this is just your image of your brand. It's not, does your brand come to mind when somebody is thinking about buying wine? That is what we call mental availability. Something triggers a category entry point, triggers someone to think about buying wine, and what brands come to mind for that situation, that purchase occasion. So it's not about the overall image. It's about what triggers buyers to think about your brand. Now you may think, especially as a smaller winery, you probably aren't in retail stores or wine shops, or not very many, where people can say, oh, I feel like having a couple bottles of wine tonight, or I'm having some guests, or I'm going to run over to the store and buy some wine. That's important to wineries that are in those stores. But those typical entry points are not really viable for most smaller wineries. And you have to think about this yourself. What triggers people to think about your brand? Is it taking a day out to go out in the country and visit a winery? Is it a wine club email or a phone call? What is it that triggers them to think about buying your wine? And once you think of that, then you can think about mental availability. How do I link my brand to those category entry points? When someone's thinking about a gift, how do I work it so my brand's one of those brands that come to mind? And I'm going to talk about this in a few more slides. Here's some data we collected in China doing some work for the Wine Australia, for the whole Australian wine industry. And you can see the 34 category entry points for China. I won't go through them all, but you can see when people think about buying wine, a business occasion, a romantic occasion, at meal times. Where do they think about it? Maybe when they're at a friend's place, or when they're at home, or going to a restaurant. And who are they with? Maybe friends or family, or maybe it's socializing with foreigners, or buying for a gift or for a boss. And why are they doing it? Well, China's a little different, rewarding themselves, health benefits. But you can see what we're getting at. These are things that could trigger someone thinking about buying wine. Now, these are not the ones I'm suggesting would be true or right for your winery. But when we collect this kind of data, we also then, by interviewing or surveying a bunch of people, we find out which of these are the most popular, which are the most frequent. And then we can link which wines people think about for different category entry points. In China, for example, if you're giving a gift or giving a gift, then you're likely to think about French wine. If you're thinking about a romantic occasion or mealtimes and dinner, it's much more likely to be Australian, something that's not quite as expensive. So how do we use category entry points and mental availability in our marketing? So you have to think, as your winery, When and why do potential buyers think about your brand? Is it for a gift, celebration with friends and family, maybe a special occasion, an enjoyable day trip, maybe a meal out at your restaurant or something like that? You need to think about that. What are the likely to be the most frequent reasons people could think about your brand? Then you try to create mental availability linked to those most popular or most frequent category entry points. Many wineries have images of glasses, people with glasses of wine, or vineyards, or tanks, or barrels, things like this. But we're suggesting that you create mental availability linked to those category entry points. If it's giving wine as a gift, then your website, your graphics, your videos, your communications that highlight your brand might show images of your wine packaged as for a gift or being given as a gift or a family celebration or the day trip. Think about not generic images because everybody uses those. Try to think about images that can be linked to the reasons people might think about your wine and use those images as best you can in everything. And I'll talk a little more about this in a few minutes. We also know that besides your brand name, and I'll spend a few slides talking in more detail, logos and images, graphics are actually better remembered in many cases than brand names. So those things have to be linked to your brand to create that mental availability and then linked to the category entry points. So we talk about two types of branding. Direct branding, which is showing or saying the brand name, pretty simple, straightforward, your brand name, and indirect branding, which is using what we call distinctive assets, non-brand name elements to convey or link to the brand name. And that's very important. So being distinctive helps break through the clutter. Showing a picture of a vineyard is not distinctive. Anyone can do that. So distinctive assets, as I said, are the non-brand name elements that signal the brand name to the consumer, that bring that link to that brand name. In wine, it's often really the packaging that does that, but depending where people buy your wine, it might be signage, it might be videos, it might be on your website, it might be various things. Just for example, distinctive assets must be unique. How many wines from Europe have we seen with pictures of old building chateaus on them? And which one is which? They're generic. Even the famous yellowtail on the left-hand side of this slide, other wineries have used animals as well. Is it really distinctive? Is it unique to your particular wine? So you can't look the same as other brands. You've got to look unique or distinctive. See these things on the right-hand side, you know those brands. We've used crazy names or mixed up their names to create non-brand name, but with the colors and with the font, the logo, you know those brands. And that's the whole point of this. If you can build distinctive assets, then you can actually increase the number of brand signals in any communication you use. And this greater neuro richness, greater than just the brand name, forget about the vineyards and things like the pictures of vineyards and casks and things like that, that actually accesses a different part of a consumer's memory than do the words. We have a bigger portion of our memory dedicated to video, to pictures, to colors than we do to audio or written language. So if you keep those distinctive assets in all your communications, you can be as creative as you want with everything else, long as that link is there. So more good things about distinctive assets, they can be communicated to consumers across multiple touch points. As I'll say in a later slide, they should be on your website. They should be on signage when people are going to the winery. They should be on the clothing that people wear when they're selling wine at the winery. They should be on your emails. They should be on your label, of course. Everything you do should have those distinctive assets. And as I said earlier, nonverbal cues are actually processed more quickly and remembered more easily than words. So this means there's a greater chance for your brand to be remembered and not filtered out, because even unconsciously, someone could see and say, oh, I remember that was the wine that had the big picture of the eagle on the cover or whatever. That kind of thing can be more important. And it has in my research, I've seen this number of times, more important than the brand name itself. If you're well branded and distinctive, consumers can find you. That mental availability will be stronger. So we talk about distinctiveness, not differentiation. If we gave a consumer 5 bottles of Cheval Blanc or 5 bottles of Riesling, of course they could tell you this one is different from this one, but they're not going to be able to tell you which brand those different wines are unless they're labeled. So you've got to be distinctive in your packaging and in the way you present your brand. And it's not automatic. You have to teach your buyers through repetition, through using it all the time on everything. Eventually, these distinctive assets, these logos, these pictures, they become boring to you. But remember about these light and infrequent buyers. They're not bored. They hardly ever see your brand. So don't worry about your boredom of repeating the same things. Make sure you repeat them over and over to your customers. And you can use these distinctive assets in everything. As I said, on your labels, and many wineries have different ranges. They have lower priced, higher priced, even sub-brands, different brands, maybe single vineyards versus grapes that have purchased out of state, whatever. You need to use those distinctive assets, at least some of them, on every single package so that people can link that to your brand. Of course, websites, social media, anything you're sending out, email, any kind of communications, signage, uniforms, even your invoices, everything should have those graphics, logos, whatever you want to use as your distinctive assets. So I hope I've kind of given you an idea about category entry points, what drives people to think about buying wine, and then how you can make your brand more likely to become mentally available when someone is actually going out to buy some wine or thinking about buying some wine. Now we'll switch gear and talk about pricing and price promotions. I said earlier, price is the most dangerous of the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps of marketing, packaging or product, distribution or place, as we say, and promotion or communication. Those are 3 Ps, and price the 4th P. So why is price the most dangerous? Because it's the easiest to change. It's a lot harder to make a new wine, to set up a different distribution or different kind of promotion or communication. Price changing is easy and often gets used when it really shouldn't. So I want you to think about price as part of your image, your strategy, not a tactic to sell more wine. We know consumers, doesn't matter the product category, have some price quality associations. Higher price usually indicates higher quality within a range. I mean, within a few dollars doesn't make much difference, but somebody buying a $15 wine is going to have different expectations as somebody buying a $35 or $50 bottle of wine. So price is part of the image, the strategy that you're creating about that whole brand or that sub-brand or that range within your brand altogether. And research that we've done and others have done as well shows that discounting, reducing your price on a price promotion has no, I repeat this, no long-term effects. It does not bring in new buyers. Who usually sees price promotions and discounts? Typically, your heavier buyers, because they're more attuned to your brand. So they're going to buy your brand anyway. They're already heavier buyers. You give them a discount, of course they'll buy it. They'll buy it, they'll stock up, and they won't buy it when the price goes back up again. And then at the end of this, in the next few slides after the next 1 or 2, I'm going to tell you why discounting usually costs you money, even if you sell more rather than making you money. So do consumers pay attention to pricing information? Research shows that consumers really overestimate the attention they pay when shopping. They recognize the brand. I mean, look at this shelf. This is a pharmacy here, but you can see, look at the colors, look at the brands, look at the way the packaging is designed. You can tell the different brands apart because of their graphics. So consumers are using those to make their choices, not so much price. Of course, they use price to some degree. If they're looking for a $15 bottle of wine, not likely to buy a $50 bottle of wine. But within that 15 to 20 range, it's the package, the label, the logo, the distinctive assets that's going to get their attention, not the price. So research has shown that if you ask people to have a shopping cart full of products, only 2% can actually get pretty close to the exact price that that product sells for. About 20% can get within 5%, 37% can get within 10%, and take 60% can't even get within 20% of the price of the product they're buying. So price, though it is important, is not as important as we like to think. So I'm going to talk about something, it's economics, but it's part of marketing as well, and that's price elasticity. It's just simply the change in volume based on the change in price. So if you change your price by 10%, what percent do you see change in volume? Usually, if you raise your price, volume goes down. That's negative elasticity. Typically, if you raise your price, volume doesn't go up. If you lower your price, volume often goes up, and that's called negative price elasticity. We won't go, I don't want you to do calculations or anything, but if you raise your price by 10% and you sell 10% less, that's elasticity of 1. If you lower your price by 10% and you sell 10% more, that's an elasticity of 1. So that's what we call kind of everyday elastic. Very few things are totally inelastic. Gasoline is one that the price has to change by quite a bit to change people's behavior, but most people respond to some degree to price changes. But the typical thing to remember is they rarely respond at the same level as the change in price. So a drop of price of 10% usually does not mean a 10% increase in sales. We did some work looking at what we call higher priced wines because people said, well, we know what happens in supermarkets with lots of research on products there. What happens with a $30, $40, $50, $60, $70, $80 bottle of wine when they raise their price or lower the price? So we found, in summary to the research, that basically higher priced wines have elasticities that are very similar to the elasticities you find in a supermarket. The higher you go in price, the less elastic it is. And especially when you have a special occasion or consumption occasion with a high priced wine, people want to buy it. They're not going to be fazed by a slight rise in price or whatever. And they're not going to buy more of it just because the price is a little bit lower. So I'll try to explain this slide. It's a little difficult to start with because our lower priced brands here, if you look at the middle where it says normal price, those low price brands are $59 and $65, mid price $72 and $76, and the high priced wines were $82 and $86. These are real world prices for those wines. And then we did an experiment where we had simulated shelves with these wines and we raised the price, that's the bottom line, and reduced the price, that's the line up above, by about 10% up and 10% down, as you can see here. What were the results? Well, the price elasticity actually decreased. There was less of an effect of price as you move from those lower priced $50 wines to the higher priced $80 wines. We didn't do $30 wines, but my guess is it's going to be the same thing. Those elasticities in the first column are pretty similar to what you find in supermarkets. But what you find interesting here is there was a greater effect of the price when you reduced, especially for those lower priced brands, than when you increased, which kind of says you could actually often increase your wine a little bit and not have a huge effect on the amount that you're going to sell. So elasticity is important. It does change the way people buy, but not as much as we often think. So what are the economics? What actually, I mean, this is really the business results. What are the profits or not of changing prices? A famous retailer once said back in the 1930s, any fool can cut the price. But the reason he said that is because anyone can do it. What you want to do is not have to cut the price, especially if you're selling online through your mailing list at cellar door at the winery itself. You don't want to cut the price. You want to offer other kinds of value like bundles of products, maybe older vintages, maybe a gift or something with the wine without changing the price. So I'm going to look at this question over the next couple slides. Can you make money from price cutting or from raising the price. This all depends on what's called the contribution margin. So what's the contribution? It's very simply, you sell a product for a certain amount of money. Some of that money is a variable cost. With wine, the variable costs tend to be the bottle, the package, the label, the cork, or the screw cap, the wine inside the bottle, the grapes that went into the wine, the oak barrels, anything that in order to sell more, you have to use more. And fixed costs are things that don't change very much with the volume sold, things like the salaries of employees or the insurance or the electricity, things like that. They change in a stepwise fashion. If you double the size of your winery, of course, some of those things are going to go up. But generally speaking, variable costs change with volume and the fixed costs do not. So a contribution is just what, after the variable costs, we sell it for a certain amount of money, take away those variable costs, what's left over is what I call the contribution to overheads and profit. So let's say you have a product that sells for $100, easier to use round numbers. So a low margin product might have $70 worth of variable costs and $30 of contribution. That helps to pay the fixed costs and hopefully some profit. A high margin product might have $50 of variable costs and then a contribution of $50 to fixed costs and profit. So for that low margin product, if you drop the price by $10, 10%, your variable costs are still $70, but now your contribution, instead of being $30, is now $20. That's a 33% drop in contribution. Even the higher contribution product that has variable costs of only $50, you take $10 off that, the contribution was $50, it's now $40. That's a 20% drop in contribution. So the hit on your margins is always more than the price drop. So if you look at what does that really mean, it means that if you have a low margin product and you drop it by $10 or 10%, you need to sell 33% more product for that 10% price drop just to break even, just to pay your variable and then fixed costs. For a high margin product, you have to sell at least 20% more for a 10% price drop. So that gives you an idea. You've got to see a big reaction to changing prices if you're really going to do some sort of discounting. What about going the other way? What about if you increase your price from 100 to 110? Well, that product that had a variable cost of $70, now you have a $40 contribution per unit. So if sales don't drop more than 33%, if they drop, say, 25%, you've already made more profit. And with the high margin product, if sales don't drop more than 20%, you again made a higher profit. So this is kind of not the secret, but this is the math or the thinking behind raising and lowering prices. Oftentimes, you can raise the price, especially of higher priced wines, without a very big effect on your sales and actually a very positive effect on your profitability. This is just a slide showing you what I talked about earlier. So we see the blue lines are the sales across a year of a number of products in a supermarket. And that just shows you that there's different times of year where they sell more or less, but it's a fairly flat line. Then you see those red lines, that's when there was a price promotion. Those are the extra sales. But you can see after every one of those price promotions, there's a little downturn. And that is exactly what happens when you sell products on promotion. Sales go up during the promotion, and then they go down after the promotion. And very likely, not only do your total annual sales not change at all, your profitability has actually gone down. So what can we say in conclusion to this presentation? Well, first of all, thinking about mental availability and distinctive assets, set and design those image graphics and your color scheme and use it on all points of contact. Okay, you might need to change. Many wineries say, well, we developed this years and years ago. We need to modernize our label or modernize our logo. That's okay, as long as it's a very small change. What we recommend and what some of the bigger brands do is they think they're going to make changes, they plan those, and they may make one change and then 2 or 3 years later make it again when the stock runs out with those labels. And eventually over 5 years, they've updated their logo, updated their fonts, but they haven't done it all at once. We have plenty of data showing that when a brand, and often a big brand that's on a supermarket shelf, changes the packaging, not even that much, but changes it so the color is different, the logo, the graphic might be different, their sales go way down because people don't recognize the brand. So if you trained people over time for mental availability to associate these distinctive assets with your brand, as soon as you change them, you lose all that training that you've done. So set those, design those. You can change colors between different, maybe red font for red wines and lighter font for white wines, but the graphics, the design, the look should be as much the same as possible. And when you think about building what is often called your brand image, we're calling it mental availability. When you think about that, think about when and what gets someone to buy, or think about buying wine and your brand might be one of the wines in their consideration set. Use images of those situations, groups of friends enjoying wine, giving wine as a gift, visiting cellar door, but make it a standardized graphic, photo, image, video that you can use across many different platforms. Use them wherever you can and stay away from generic images that don't tell anyone about your brand. Then we talk about prices. Set them based on what you want to call your brand image or your price quality relationship. Where do you see your brand in competition? And use price as that kind of signal, not as a flag to buy it now, buy it today, it's cheap. Use price as part of your strategy to create maybe different levels of brands within your portfolio, different quality levels, using price as one of those signals. Now, if I can say anything finally, refrain from discounting. It doesn't attract new customers. It really typically is found out mainly by existing customers, and they buy the brand anyway. It doesn't make them more loyal. We know this after looking at hundreds of thousands of these kind of promotions over many, many different categories over a number of years, that loyalty, purchase, repeat purchase does not change with price discounting. So just, if you can avoid it, avoid it. Now, sometimes if you're in certain retail stores, whatever, they're going to say, we expect you to have a sale X times a year. Well, you can do that. But don't use price if you don't have to as the reason for people to buy your wine. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. If this is going live and I can be there, I'll be happy to answer questions. I do have a book. If you're interested to think about more about the things that I've talked about today, it's called This Little Pinot Went to Market. And it's available as an ebook or available as a softback printed book. And you can see the web address to consider buying it there. If you have questions that I can't answer today, here's my email address, and you're welcome to send me questions or comments. I'll be happy to answer those. I really enjoyed talking to all of you today, and I wish you all the very best. Thanks a lot.